The old man died on a Tuesday in January 1971, and by Friday morning, two grown men sat in a lawyer's office above a bank in northwestern Iowa and walked out into completely different futures. One of them just didn't know yet that his future was going to destroy him. This story is not about farming. It's not about tractors. It's about a dead man who saw something nobody else around him could see and used his last legal document on this earth to try to protect the people he loved from their own worst instincts. One of them listened, one of them didn't. And what played out over the next 12 years was a slow-motion financial catastrophe that thousands of families across America lived through without ever understanding what hit them. Stay with me until the end. Before we begin, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. I've spent 2 years tracking down every financial record, every USDA report, every Federal Reserve agricultural lending document from this era. Then I went and sat on the porch of a 94-year-old man in Sioux County, Iowa, who lived every single word of what I'm about to tell you. This is a true story. And if you've ever borrowed money, taken out a mortgage, or made a financial decision, during a boom, you need to hear it. Curtis Holloway was 68 years old when the lung cancer caught up with him. He'd farmed the same stretch of northwestern Iowa his entire life, flat, dark, rich soil that could grow corn and soybeans as well as anywhere in the Midwest. He'd survived the Great Depression as a young man. He'd watched the lean years after World War II strip neighbors bare. He'd seen enough cycles come and go that they'd become almost predictable to him, not in their timing, but in their certainty. When Curtis died, he left behind 2 men he'd raised as sons. Raymond, his biological son, was 41. Danny, his nephew, the boy he'd taken in after his brother came home from Korea in a box, was 39. Both men had worked that land beside Curtis for years. Both expected to inherit the operation equally. Both were wrong. Thomas Brennan, attorney at law, read the will on a gray February morning in his office above the Farmers and Merchants Bank in Howarden, Iowa. And what he read changed 2 lives forever. Raymond received 320 acres of Curtis's original farmland. Paid off. Not a penny owed to any bank. Clean, debt-free ownership of land worth approximately $112,000 at $350 an acre. Fair market value for Sioux County in 1971. Along with the land came every piece of equipment Curtis owned. A 1949 John Deere Model A, a 1958 John Deere 620, a corn planter, a grain drill, 2 wagons, and an assortment of plows and cultivators ranging from serviceable to nearly worthless. The equipment might fetch $8,000 at auction on a generous day. Total inheritance, roughly $120,000. All equity, 0 debt. Danny's terms were entirely different. Curtis stipulated that Danny would receive 320 acres of land. Land Curtis had been renting from a widow named Eleanor Voss for 15 years. Mrs. Voss had agreed to sell at $380 an acre, about 10% below market. The will included a cashier's check for $25,000 as a down payment, with Danny responsible for financing the remaining $96,400. Additionally, Danny was authorized through the estate to purchase a brand new International Harvester 1066 tractor and a full complement of modern equipment financed through the local dealer. Total debt package, just over $115,000 at interest rates already climbing past 7.5%. Raymond felt cheated. He was the blood son. He'd gotten the old stuff, the tired equipment, the ancient tractors, while Danny had been handed a pathway to a modern operation. At the cafe across from the courthouse, Raymond finally said what he was thinking. "He gave you the future," Raymond said. "He gave me the past." Danny, who felt guilty about the whole arrangement, started to protest. Raymond waved him off. "It's done. Dad made his choice. We'll both make it work." But that night, talking to his wife Margaret in the same farmhouse Curtis had raised him in, Raymond made a decision. He wasn't going to farm with junk his whole life. He had equity. He could leverage it. Within 2 months, Raymond had taken out a $45,000 loan against his paid-off land at 8.25% interest. He sold the old Model A and the 620 at auction for a combined $3,200. Pocket change, he thought, for relics that belonged in a museum. Stay with me until the end. Before we begin, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. He bought a used 1968 John Deere 4020 for $11,000, upgraded his planter, improved his grain handling, and put the rest toward operating costs. He was modernized now. Competitive. Farming the way a serious farmer was supposed to farm. Now I need to stop here, because you need to understand what these machines actually were. This detail is not background color. This detail is the entire story. The 1949 John Deere Model A was a two-cylinder workhorse built with a simplicity that was almost defiant. About 38 horsepower, simple systems, cheap parts. Any man with a decent set of wrenches could fix one himself in a cold barn on a winter night. By 1971, it was 22 years old, ancient by modern standards, but these machines were built like anvils. Maintained properly, they ran forever. The 1958 John Deere 620 was slightly more modern, 43 horsepower, live hydraulics, but still a two-cylinder, still simple, still owned outright and free. Now compare that to what Danny bought, the International Harvester 1066, brand new in 1971. A turbocharged six-cylinder diesel producing 125 horsepower. Climate-controlled cab, power steering. It could pull an 8-bottom plow through anything. It weighed over 15,000 pounds and cost $13,800 new. It was everything modern agriculture was becoming. Bigger, faster, more capable, and vastly more expensive to buy, fuel, and repair. The 40-20 Raymond bought came from the same generation of thinking. More power, more complexity, more cost. Neither man stopped to ask the question that Curtis Holloway had spent a lifetime answering: what happens to all of this when the market turns? The early 1970s were a boom time for American agriculture by every measurable standard. According to USDA Economic Research Service data, corn that averaged around $1 a bushel in 1970 shot up to $1.57 in 1972, then $2.55 in 1973, and peaked at $3.02 in 1974. Soybean prices broke $6 a bushel in 1973. The Soviet grain deal of 1972, where the USSR bought enormous quantities of American corn and wheat almost overnight, lit a fire under commodities that made farmers feel genuinely wealthy for the first time in a generation. Iowa farmland climbed from $275 an acre in 1970 to over $600 by 1975. Both Raymond and Danny made good money during these years. Real money. Raymond's modernized operation was efficient. Danny's 1066 was a powerhouse. He even picked up custom work for neighbors, which helped chip away at those $1,200 monthly debt payments. By the 4th of July gathering in 1975, Raymond had actually apologized to Danny over a beer. "I was wrong about Dad's will," Raymond admitted. "You got saddled with debt and I got a clean start. I'm sorry I was bitter." Danny brushed it off. "We're both making it work. That's what matters." Neither man could have known they were standing at the peak of a mountain, looking down into a valley so deep it would swallow everything Danny had worked for. Here is what the boom years obscured. And this comes directly from Federal Reserve agricultural lending reports of the period. Raymond's cost structure had fundamentally changed the moment he took out that $45,000 loan. He now had $435 a month in debt service, every month, rain or shine, good harvest or bad. Fuel costs were higher, maintenance costs were higher, property taxes were higher because the land had been assessed at its newly inflated value. Danny's situation was even more extreme. His monthly debt service alone, before a single dollar of operating expense, was over $1,200 every month, guaranteed, whether it rained or not, whether prices held or not, whether the harvest came in clean or got flattened by a summer hailstorm. And here is something that almost nobody talks about when they discuss this era. The debt that farmers took on in the early 1970s wasn't calculated against historical averages or conservative projections. It was calculated against the inflated prices of the moment, with the open assumption, taught in universities and preached by agricultural extension agents across the Midwest, that those prices were the new permanent normal. That global demand had changed everything, that the old boom and bust cycle of farming was finished, that anyone who didn't leverage up and modernize was going to be left behind forever. Curtis Holloway had heard all of it before. He'd farmed through the Depression. He'd watched the years after World War II flatten men who'd borrowed against optimism. He knew what was coming. He just didn't know when. And he died before he could explain it. His will, which had seemed so arbitrary, so unfair to Raymond, was not arbitrary at all. It was a message from a man who understood something almost nobody around him believed anymore. Debt in farming is not a ladder. It's a chain, and chains feel fine until the market locks around your ankle. The warning signs came gently at first. In 1976, corn prices softened to $2.15 a bushel. Still profitable. In 1977, they dropped to $2.02. In 1978, to $1.93s. Gradual. Almost polite. You could look at any single year and tell yourself it wasn't a trend. Then, January 1980 happened. President Carter, responding to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, imposed a grain embargo. The export market that had built the entire boom, gone overnight. Grain that should have been heading to overseas buyers piled up in American elevators. Prices didn't just drop, they crashed. By 1980, corn was back under $2 a bushel. Simultaneously, interest rates exploded. The Federal Reserve, fighting the worst inflation in modern American history, drove the prime lending rate to 15.226% in 1980. It peaked above 20% in 1981. Agricultural loans were pushing 18 to 20%. Farmers who had borrowed at 7 or 8% were watching their variable rate loans adjust upward every month, or being forced to refinance at rates that made the original terms look like charity, and then land values collapsed. Iowa, farmland that peaked at over $1,000 an acre in 1981 fell below $600 by 1985. Farmers who had borrowed against peak values found themselves underwater, owing more than the collateral was worth. Input costs didn't follow commodity prices down. Diesel that cost 85 cents a gallon in 1978 hit $1.20 by 1980. Anhydrous ammonia had nearly tripled since the early part of the decade. Farmers were caught in a vice, falling income on one side, rising costs, and crushing debt on the other. Danny started missing payments in late 1980, not because he was a bad farmer, not because he was lazy or incompetent. The man could farm, but the mathematics simply didn't work anymore. At $1.80 corn, there was no arithmetic that produced enough cash flow to cover $1,200 a month in debt service, plus operating costs. He went to the bank in early 1981 to refinance, to buy breathing room, some time to wait out what everyone hoped was temporary. The bank said no. Different management now. Different calculus. They looked at his debt-to-asset ratio, looked at the falling land values underneath his loan and said, "Sell equipment, reduce your debt, prove you can survive." Danny sold the International 1066 in the spring of 1981 for $8,000. The machine that had cost $13,800 new, that had been his inheritance, his future, went for $8,000 at distressed sale. He bought a used John Deere 4020 for $4,500 and tried to restructure, tried to survive. It was too late. In November 1982, Farmers and Merchants Bank foreclosed on the Voss land. Danny Holloway lost everything except his pride and a hard education. In exactly how thin the margin between success and ruin really is. Raymond's situation was different, but only by degrees. He'd borrowed $45,000 instead of $115,000, and his payments were proportionally lower. But he was still carrying $435 a month at elevated interest rates, and his cost structure was still built on modern inputs. When corn dropped below $2, Raymond was barely breaking even on crops and actively losing ground to debt and operating costs combined. What Raymond did next probably saved him, and it cost him more pride than almost anything he'd ever done. In 1981, he drove 3 miles to an estate auction for a neighbor who had gone under. He bought 2 tractors for a combined $200. One was a 1951 John Deere Model A, nearly identical to the one his father had left him and he'd sold a decade earlier. The other was a 1959 John Deere 630. He sold his 40-20 for $6,800, used every dollar to pay down principal, and went back to farming the way Curtis Holloway had always farmed. Old equipment, paid for, fixable with basic tools in his own hands. Machines that sipped fuel instead of gulping it. His neighbors thought he'd lost his mind. It was 1981. Raymond Holloway was driving Korean War-era equipment through his fields, while everyone else was trying desperately to hold on to modern operations. But Raymond had done the math. Debt service under $300 a month, fuel costs down 60%, maintenance costs nearly eliminated. At 180 corn with that cost structure, Raymond could survive. Barely, but he could survive. By 1985, when the worst had passed, Raymond was still farming his 320 acres. Loan paid off completely. Farming debt-free on land he owned without condition, with equipment older than his grandchildren. Danny had moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where he got a job in the parts department of a John Deere dealership, the C. Irony was not lost on him, selling parts for tractors he could no longer afford to own, helping farmers maintain equipment while his own operation had been liquidated. He was 46 years old and starting over. He wasn't angry at Curtis anymore. He understood what Curtis had tried to teach him. He understood it the way you can only understand a lesson that cost you everything to learn. Here's something that almost never gets mentioned when people discuss the 1980s farm crisis, and this comes directly from agricultural economists who studied this period. The farmers who survived were not necessarily the best farmers, not the most efficient, not the ones with the highest yields or the most modern operations. The farmers who survived were the ones with the lowest cost structures and the least debt. The correlation between survival and low debt-to-asset ratios was almost mathematically perfect. If you owed more than 50% of your farm's value, you probably lost it. If you owed less than 30%, you probably survived. Curtis Holloway had structured his will to create a 0% debt inheritance for Raymond and a 75% debt situation for Danny. He had done it deliberately, though his reasoning died with him. My best understanding is this: Curtis loved both boys equally, but understood them differently. Raymond was cautious by nature, the kind of man who would hold the line and maintain what he was given. Danny was ambitious and aggressive, the kind of man who would always push further, always leverage more, always chase the next horizon. Curtis gave Raymond protection from his own caution, and he gave Danny a test of his own ambition, with real consequences if he failed it. Danny failed the test, and Raymond, who'd tried to cheat the lesson his father left him, who'd gone straight to the bank within 2 months of the will reading, had only barely, by the skin of his pride and his willingness to drive back to a 1951 tractor in 1981, managed to pass it. Raymond Holloway is 94 years old now. He still lives in the same farmhouse Curtis raised him in. His son farms the operation, Curtis Jr., named for the grandfather he never fully knew. In the machine shed behind the house, there is a 1951 John Deere Model A, meticulously maintained, that starts on the first crank. That 2-cylinder pop, pop, pop sound fills the shed like something between machinery and memory. My dad left me this exact tractor, Raymond told me, his hand resting on the hood, or one just like it, and I sold it. He said it without self-pity, just as a fact. Best thing that ever happened to me was having to buy it back. Curtis Jr. farms 960 acres. Now, having bought adjacent land during the crisis years when prices had bottomed out, the original 320 acres remain the foundation, the paid-off base that lets the whole operation breathe when markets turn. In 2019, Curtis Jr. did something worth knowing. Danny's son, also named Curtis, had been working construction in Sioux Falls. He'd saved some money. His wife had steady income. They found a small acreage they could afford, and the young man wanted to try farming. Curtis Jr. drove to an estate auction and bought him a 1955 John Deere Model 70 for $3,500, a two-cylinder tractor from the same era as the machines his grandfather had originally left Raymond in 1971. "Start with something you own," Curtis Jr. told his cousin. "Something that won't bury you if you have a bad year. Something you can fix yourself when it breaks. Build from there, but start solid." 4 generations, same philosophy, not a tractor model or a farming technique. A way of thinking about debt and survival, and what it means to still be standing when the dust finally settles. When I talked to Danny for this story, I asked him what he understood now that he hadn't understood at 39. He took a long time before he answered. "I don't blame Uncle Curtis," he said. "I blamed him for a long time. When I was in that bank office hearing the word foreclosure, I blamed him, thought he'd set me up to fail. But that's not what he did. He tried to teach me something I was too stubborn to learn until it was too late. He knew I'd expand, knew I'd leverage, knew I'd chase the growth. He set it up so I could do that, but with guardrails. I just didn't see the guardrails until I'd already crashed through them. I tracked down the International Harvester 1066 that Danny bought new in 1971 and sold in distress in 1981. It took a while, but I found it. It's owned now by a collector in Nebraska who restores classic farm equipment, completely rebuilt, show quality, red paint. It appears at antique tractor events where people walk around it slowly and remember what those machines meant. He paid $8,000 for it in rough condition in the late 1990s. He's put another $12,000 into the restoration. "These 1066 were magnificent machines," he told me. "The engineering, the power, the capability, they were everything a farmer could want in 1971. He paused. "They also bankrupted a lot of farmers who bought them at the wrong time with the wrong financial structure underneath them. The tractor wasn't the problem. The timing and the debt were the problem. The tractor wasn't the problem. The timing and the debt were the problem." That sentence applies to every financial catastrophe I've ever studied. The asset is rarely the villain. The problem is the structure, the debt load, the cost base, the vulnerability built into an operation before the market gets a chance to test it. You can have the most powerful, most modern equipment in the world. If your debt-to-asset ratio is 75% when the market turns, you're finished. You can have machines that are 30 years old, machines your neighbors laugh at. If you own them outright and your land is free and clear, you can survive almost anything. This principle doesn't belong to farming. It belongs to every business that has ever borrowed against a boom. Every family that has taken on debt because times were good and the experts said times would stay good. The question is never whether you can make the payments when everything is going well. The question is whether you can make the payments when everything goes wrong at once, because that moment always comes. The cycle was never broken. It was just dormant, gathering energy for its next turn. According to USDA census data, the United States lost over 235,000 farms between 1980 and 1985. In Iowa specifically, thousands of foreclosures. Entire rural communities hollowed out. Families who had farmed the same land for 5 generations walked away with nothing. There were divorces, there were suicides. The social fabric of small-town America was shredded in those years, and most of the country never noticed. The farmers who were destroyed had done everything right by the standards of their time. They had modernized, they had leveraged their equity, they had listened to the economists and the bankers and the extension agents, all of whom said the same thing. Get big or get out, the old cycle is broken, the new demand is permanent. They did exactly what they were told to do, and it destroyed them. The farmers who survived looked backward and foolish from 1972 to 1978. Then they looked like the only ones still standing. Curtis Holloway was not a theorist. He was not an economist. He was a man who had farmed since before the Depression and had watched enough cycles to stop being surprised by any of them. He couldn't tell his sons when the next collapse would come, but he could build a structure, embedded in the pages, of a will. That gave both of them their best possible chance of surviving it. One through protection, one through hard experience. Both were gifts. Only one of them felt like it at the time. Raymond told me something on his porch last summer that I haven't stopped thinking about since. People think my dad was being unfair when he split things the way he did. They think he favored Danny or didn't trust me. That's not what he was doing. He looked out over fields his family had farmed for generations. He was giving me the ability to fail without losing everything, and giving Danny the ability to succeed spectacularly if he had what it took to manage what came with that chance. He paused. Dad knew that farming isn't about the equipment. It's not about the yield or the acreage or how modern your operation looks. It's about still being there when the dust settles. He looked at me. That's the whole game. Always has been, still being there. The Model A in Raymond's shed starts on the first crank, every time. That two-cylinder engine catches with a sound that carries in it 50 years of Iowa history, of men who knew how to fix what was broken, plant what would grow, and wait out what would pass. It is not fast. It is not comfortable. It burns a few gallons of gas to do work that a modern machine could do in a fraction of the time, but it is paid for. And in farming, in business, in life, in any enterprise where debt is the difference between surviving and not surviving. Sometimes that matters more than everything else combined. Start with something you own, something that won't bury you if you have a bad year. Build from there. But start solid. That is the lesson. The whole lesson. And it will keep being true long after the last two-cylinder John Deere has made its final sound somewhere in a machine shed in northwestern Iowa, and the man who loved it has gone to rest in the same soil his father farmed, and his father before him, still being there. That's the whole game.